All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to USA Hockey Arena in Plymouth, Michigan, here in the greater Detroit metropolitan area. A terrific day ahead as we announce the management and coaching staff for our 2018 U.S. Olympic men's ice hockey team. I'm Dave Fisher, Chief Spokesman for USA Hockey, and on behalf of USA Hockey and the U.S. Olympic Committee, my pleasure to take us through the proceedings today. Our format will be very straightforward. You'll hear from a few speakers, and then we'll take the questions from the assembled news media here in the audience after we're done with that. And for those media watching on the live stream, certainly you can participate remotely as well if you want to tweet your questions to @USA Hockey and just use the hashtag AskUSAH. And I'll remind you that when we get to that portion of the program. We begin today with the Executive Director of USA Hockey. He's someone just a couple months into that role, but certainly someone that's been part of the USA Hockey staff for a long time. He came into the job having overseen development for the organization, and that's kind of two-pronged development in the sense of the growth of the game, getting more players and families into the game, especially at the entry level at 8 and under, and those numbers have shot up by 20% over the last 8 years. That's terrific news. And also on the foundation side and raising funds to help support the initiatives of USA Hockey through the USA Hockey Foundation. And certainly pleasing to see that our Circle of Champions donors have increased fivefold over the last 5 years. He's grown up in the sport as a player. His professional life has all been in hockey, and he still continues today as a volunteer coach at the youth level, 25 years plus doing that. And to start us today, please welcome Pat Kelleher. Pat.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here at our home in Plymouth. I want to first thank our staff. They've done an incredible job with the World Junior Summer Showcase this week, so thanks to all of them. As we hit August and head towards the start of the traditional start of the season for 27-18, we've got a lot of things to be excited about at USA Hockey. First and foremost, as Dave alluded to, we've got a record number of players around the country. We had record growth at our 8 and under, the entry level, which is significant for the future of the game. We had record number of growth at females playing, record numbers at the adult level. So all those things add up to more players, more people involved with our game than ever before. Along with our efforts to grow the game, we're always focused on making the game safer around the country for kids and adults that play. We're focused on our development programs for players, officials, and coaches. All those things add up to the things that we do and ultimately produce high-level teams and high-level athletes. This year's a big year for us coming up. We're hosting the World Juniors in Buffalo, as everybody's aware of. We'll have the first ever outdoor game at the World Junior Championships on December 29th at New Era Field in Buffalo against Canada. And of course, 2018 is an Olympic and Paralympic year. I think everybody's familiar with the success we've had at our women's program. We won 7 of the last 8 World Championships. Our women's national team will gather in the beginning of September for their residency program leading into the Olympics. They'll be in Tampa suburb of Wesley Chapel, Florida, starting on September 6th. We'll be announcing a series of games for our women's program later this month. We'll have details out to the media to announce a series of games that we play against Canada and some others across the country. It's the 20th anniversary of our 1998 women's team, the first team to win the women's gold medal in the Olympics, and certainly our team is ready and focused on winning another gold medal for the U.S. this year at the Olympic Games. Our sled team has won 3 of the past 4 gold medals at the Paralympics, including the last 2 Paralympic gold medals. We recently named our sled national team and we'll be participating in training camps and games this summer. This fall. We will name our sled national team. We'll name the final team for the sled team and the women's team on or about January 1st of this year. And of course, today the men's team is a topic of conversation. We'll get into those details with the next couple of speakers. Finally, I'd like to close by thanking the U.S. Olympic Committee for all that they do to support our Olympic athletes and our Paralympic athletes. And again, thank you all, the media, for being here, all you do to cover our sport and our programs. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. USA Hockey, I think most of you know, at the core is a grassroots sports organization, provides the foundation for youth hockey all across our country. And USA Hockey is governed by a volunteer board of directors. Volunteer meaning they do not get paid, put lots of time and effort because they're so passionate about the sport, especially when you get to the officer level, including that of the president. Usually our presidents, and there have only been now 5 in the 80-plus year history of USA Hockey, are people that have gained stature in the sport by going through the various levels of USA Hockey. They're very successful business people that have time to dedicate to the sport, probably more time focused on USA Hockey than they do in their own business. That's certainly the case with our current president. He's been engaged in the sport for 45 plus years as a player, coach, referee, administrator. He started his involvement with USA Hockey in 1985 on our player development committee, was elected to the board of directors in 1987 and has been part of the board of directors since that time. He's full of passion and energy. We're fortunate to have him as our president, and oddly enough, it is his birthday today. Without further ado, the president of USA Hockey, Jim Smith.
I didn't know what it felt like to reach age 40, but I guess I now know. So, and Dave did mention that we are a volunteer-based organization and we don't get paid. However, we do work for food, as Walter Bush used to say, and by the looks of me, I do a lot of work. So I'm very excited to be here today, and I'm very proud to be president of this organization, primarily because I think hockey is in a very good place worldwide, not just in the United States, but in Canada and across the world. We're in a pretty good place. And one of the things we do, Pat mentioned a little bit about the growth, and that's kind of how we measure things. But we also measure what we do on the international stage. And this past year, I'm very proud of the fact that for the first time in the history of the sport, the United States won 5 of 6 gold medals in IIHF competition. It's the first time any nation has done that, and I think that should be repeated. 5 of 6 gold medals in IIHF competition, first time ever. Pat said the record number of people playing the game. That's another way we measure. But I remember not too long ago that most of our players from our player pool came from the 3 M's, Michigan, Minnesota, and Massachusetts. But today, they're coming from across the nation, as you saw from our draft pick last year, the first pick in the draft last year from Arizona. I come from a state, Illinois. We're the 6th largest, a little over 31,000 people. California now has creeped up to about 30,000 participants playing. And who would have thought a decade ago, California, Arizona, that's where our players would be coming from. It's amazing. Oahu in Hawaii has over 300. They've doubled their numbers in the last 5 years. But this doesn't happen just by itself. It happens with partnerships and relationships. And one of the ones I'm most proud of that has been built before I came on board was our relationship with the National Hockey League and the NHLPA. They've been very strong and committed to helping hockey worldwide, but also our organization with their Learn to Play initiative. That's going to make our numbers even stronger over the course of the next decade, and their expansion into newer markets like you see in Las Vegas and things to come down the road. So I think it's safe to say that there's no other sports organization, probably not only in this country, but in the world, that has a closer tie to their corresponding professional sports group, and that's the National Hockey League. So I want to thank Gary Bettman and Bill Daly for taking the leadership role in that. I'd be remiss also not to mention our volunteers. We're, as Dave mentioned and Pat mentioned, we're a volunteer-based organization. Our lifeblood of our organization is our volunteers. And without them, they have built the structure and the events and the different things that take place throughout the country to make our players successful and be able to reach their full potential. So I want to thank our volunteers. But now to the matter at hand. I'm very pleased to be here to announce our general manager for the 2018 Olympic men's hockey team. But before I do that, I want to recognize somebody, Gavin Reagan, who's sitting here in the second row. He's a volunteer, like myself. He's from upstate New York. He's the vice president of our international council, and he kind of oversees all of our international play, including the women's, the sled, our men's team, and obviously our Olympic team. So Gavin, thank you for all that you do. When Gavin, Pat, and myself sat down and discussed different candidates, it didn't take us long to find the answer, who we wanted to have lead our team. And we went through a lot of great candidates. We have a lot of talented people in the United States involved in hockey, so it was a difficult decision. But in another way, it was rather easy because we found someone internally that matched our success and has the experience. The individual that I'm going to announce played in our 1988 and 1992 Olympic team. He's been part of our management group for the past 3 Olympics in Torino, in Vancouver, and Sochi. He's currently head of our hockey operations department, assistant executive director for USA Hockey. He's been our general manager for the past 8 consecutive years for our World Juniors. In that time, we've brought home 3 gold medals from the World Juniors. Again, no other country has done that in the last decade. So he's got the depth of experience. He's also, and probably the most important reason for his selection, there's probably no other individual that has the knowledge of the talent pool because of this year's events than this gentleman. So with him at the helm, I'm very confident that we will be successful and he'll provide every opportunity for our players to succeed. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the 2018 Olympic men's hockey team general manager, Mr. Jim Johansson.
Thanks, Jim. I guess for me, it sets in when you finally hear those words. But when we first started talking about this, and special thanks, obviously, to Gavin, to Jim, and Pat. When we first started talking about it, one of my emphasis is I wanted this to be quote-unquote USA hockey. I just thought it was important with the Olympics and everything in the relationship and that has grown over the years that I wanted this whole thing to look, feel, and be USA hockey. And that led to a lot of the discussions that we led in coming into our coaching announcement today. But I do want to thank, obviously, the leadership at USA Hockey. There's a few that came before these guys that were a huge part of my growth and my development, namely Ron DiGregorio, and Tony Rossi from the international side of it. From a staff standpoint, Art Berglund has been a guy that's been such a mentor to me and provided me the grounds, the opportunity, and the way to grow as an administrator, if you will, but just to grow in USA Hockey. And then from a little bit more on the hockey side, Lou Vero has been a guy that's always been a sounding board for me and someone that I know I could always talk to about hockey issues or other issues for that matter, for those that know Lou. But again, the mentorship that I received from them gentlemen has just been such a value to me going forward. I'd also want to sincerely thank all the staff members at USA Hockey. Every time I get to go to events and around our players especially, I emphasize to them how hard the people at USA Hockey are working for them to get that opportunity. And every day I go to the office, there's people that are working to make this sport better, to get more boys and girls in the sport. And as Jim Smith hit, the volunteers are key to that growth. But the staff people at USA Hockey do an unbelievable job behind the scenes to help support our national teams and our ultimately the players that are representing us. So special thanks to all of them in Colorado Springs and certainly here at USA Hockey Arena for all the support that they give to our programs. When I think about the Olympics, to me, it's about the players. It's really about the players, and it's about that experience, and it's about representing your country, but it's also that little tingle that every kid feels about being an Olympian. And I know going into this year, I'm so excited for the player pool that we're going to have. I've spent the last 5 weeks probably speaking to roughly 80 or 90 players, and I talk to a new one almost every day in this process, and I can't tell you the excitement that's coming through the phone for these guys about the potential and the opportunity to play for USA Hockey in the Olympics. It's almost like a refresher. It's like you've hit a button with some of these players in their careers at various stages, and that's across both Europe and guys that are playing college, and now as we know, some guys under American Hockey League contracts. But when I'm making those phone calls, I feel like I'm calling a little kid for the first time that's got new excitement, new energy in his mouth, and to me that's a big part of what the Olympics was for me, going through it both as a player and now on the administrative side of it. So from that aspect, I can't tell you how excited we are about that, and I know we're going to get into a little bit more on the player front later, but to me, it is first and foremost about the players. As I started to formulate the plans of how I wanted to structure our staff, for me, one guy I needed with me through it was Ben Smith. Ben Smith's been a guy that's done so much for USA Hockey. I can't categorize all of it right here today, but he's also a guy that's been a mentor for me, but he's also been a trusted confidant and been an absolute trooper in the rinks. I know Jim alluded to the player pool. Ben Smith's a guy that's watched more hockey for USA Hockey over the past several years at all levels of the game, but lately, obviously, an emphasis on the junior side of it. And he's a guy that actually coached players that played in Europe for us at past events and knows and understands what the Olympics are. And for me, he was an important sounding board going forward with the staff. So I talked to Ben a little bit and then started laying out some plans and put a lot of names on paper. And every time we started talking about it, I started talking about USA Hockey. And I said, I want this to be USA Hockey. I want it to feel USA Hockey. And the whole time as we're talking about names, I remember Ben a few times said, well, are they going to be available? And I said, I don't know, but we're going to get to that later. And so the more we started talking, it came clear and evident to me where I wanted to go with the coaching staff. And today, I'd like to officially announce our coaching staff first and get into some of those players. But I'm pleased and thrilled to announce that Tony Granato will serve as our head coach here in 2018 Men's Olympic team. So, Tony, appreciate that. I'll circle back, obviously. Joining Tony, I have Chris Chelios, Keith Elaine, Scott Young, and Ron Ralston. As I mentioned to everybody here, I wanted it to be USA Hockey. When I say those 5 names combined with Ben, that's USA Hockey. For me, there's a long history with all those guys. 3 guys were some of the best teammates that I ever had the pleasure to get to play with. And in the history of things, if you look at USA Hockey, Keith Elaine has done so much for this organization at a wide variety of levels, from head coaching to support staff roles. And as a guy that also understands what the tournament and what the Olympics are. And when I called Tony to talk to him about it, we really started talking about a package of coaches pretty quick. And the great part from my perspective with Tony was that, number one, I was thrilled that I found out he was going to be available. and then secondly, when we started talking about it, and the complete buy-in of those individuals building this team forward. There were so many things I wanted to talk to Tony about, but we had the short discussion and got into the coaching component of it, and then we basically looked at each other and said, let's go get these guys. And so then we started to make the phone calls. I'd especially like to thank the University of Wisconsin. I'd like to thank Boston University. I'd like to thank Yale University for allowing their coaches to come join the U.S. Olympic team. With Tony, and I know he'll speak to it a little bit, he said, I'll get back to you in a few minutes, and literally he got back to me in a few minutes, clearing things with his leadership to be a part of this. We're going to get into the structure of our season and things like that. I think it is important to note that all these coaches are still going to be doing their jobs during the year. We are going to have a program of competition in November, and then basically show up in February with our team. But the important thing for me was that they're also going to stay and be with their respective clubs and coach, yet give the time to USA Hockey to help us put this team on the ice and represent USA Hockey at the Olympics. I think when I go down the list of those guys coaching, for me, I have a long experience with all of them, but the thread, if people want to ask the thread that what brought it, these guys are all unbelievable competitors. I think for me, Tony's one of the greatest competitors I ever played with. I think Chris Chelios, he obviously speaks for itself. And Scotty Young, quietly and unbeknownst to so many people, is one of the greatest competitors that ever put the U.S. jersey on. So from that part of the hockey part of it, these guys were the kind of guys I wanted, and I know that they're going to instill that in the players that we get, but I also know they're going to have the ultimate respect of what those players are giving us at the Olympic Games. And Keith and Ronnie, 2 guys that have obviously huge experience with USA Hockey. Ronnie Ralston, an incredible job as a development coach here and helping the foundation of this program and building the legacy with it, but also a guy that's got huge international experience in preparing teams and knowing the competition. And the same thing with Keith, of his history of helping coaching staffs in a wide variety of roles. So feel just great about, for me, batting 1,000 from my conversation with Tony about getting all those guys on board with us and being a part of this Olympic process for us. I think friendship with Tony goes way back, and obviously played together at Wisconsin, but I think more importantly, it's been a mutual respect friendship, but it's also been one of anytime you call, he answers the call, and secondly, will come represent whatever it is. He's a guy that's actually coached at the Deutschland Cup tournament that we'll play in this year. He's a guy that's coached at this camp as a guest coach. He's a guy that spoke at coaching clinics for us. He's a guy that's volunteered his time. He's also obviously a guy that wore the jersey proudly for us and represented us so much in competition. So a long time ago, Art Berglund told me, when you're gonna put these teams together and you're gonna be together for 20+ days in some situations, you might as well take guys that you really want to hang around and be with. And Tony, fortunately for me, is a guy that I've got to hang around and be with so many years. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Tony Granato as the head coach of the 2018 Olympic team.
Thank you very much, Jimmy, Jim, Pat, Gavin, all of USA Hockey, Ben Smith. As you might expect, I'm unbelievably honored to be up here today as the new U.S. Olympic hockey coach. I looked at the people available for this position, and we look at the depth of our players that USA Hockey's produced over the years, but I think it's important to look at the coaches that are available and to be selected amongst the group to represent our U.S. program at the Olympic stage is an unbelievable compliment, and obviously I'm honored and humbled by that. So I appreciate you guys showing the faith and confidence in me. I am obviously more than excited to get this thing underway and going. Like Jimmy said, when the first call came in, lots of things come racing through your mind about, geez, how are we going to get ready to do this? You know, what kind of team we're going to put together, but most importantly, how are we going to put a staff together to prepare a team to be ready to compete for a medal at the Olympics. And when the names Chelios, Young, and Ronnie came up, and Keith came up, I said, if we're able to pull this off and get those guys, we got as good a staff as you could put together. So the problem with Chris is, and we joked about it last night at dinner, is right now he's probably skating somewhere thinking we're asking him to play as well. He's probably going to apply for the player assistant coaching position for all of us that know Chris, and I'm probably not lying. I think that's probably what he's doing today. But it's the experiences that we've all had in the game. We've been blessed to wear the American sweater. We've done it as players, as coaches, as volunteers, as fans. I was fortunate enough to watch my sister in a couple Olympics as a fan and spectator. There is no greater thrill in the game of hockey than to be able to cheer for, represent, wear the sweater, and wear the colors. And I know our guys that are here today that are coaching the World Junior team that did just such a phenomenal job last year. The pride that we have in being associated with the American program and Team USA is what makes it special. So I'm obviously extremely honored to be here. I'm looking forward to the challenge of putting together a team that will compete for a medal. I think that our depth is at its greatest point for USA Hockey. We look at the programs, the USHL, the North American League. Our development program here has been such a staple for helping us in international play, preparing our players, and the growth of our game continues to grow and grow and grow. So many thanks to all those contributions of those leagues on how we've got to this position to be able to draw from such a great pool of players. So there's players playing internationally, there's world-class players, Americans playing all over the world, and we're looking forward to finding the best 25 that will represent our country in the ways that Jimmy talked about, with pride, with passion, with energy. We think we can become a real competitive team with how we skate. There's plenty of skilled players out there that will allow us to compete with the world's best. So we're looking forward to those challenges. I am going to sit down, and we can open it up to many questions. But I look forward to, and I appreciate all the media here for being here today as we start our process to get ready for Seoul in a few months. So thank you.
All right, thanks very much. And we'll get to your questions. The release that goes with this is on the front of usahockey.com for those of you wondering. And Ben Smith, official title, be a Director of Player Personnel on the management side with Jim. Just again, for your notes on that. And with that, be happy to take your questions. We've got Laurel's got one mic. Mike's got the other. Most of the media are up here, I think, guys, so come forward. Start with Larry right here. Please identify yourself and your affiliation and who the question's directed to each time. Thanks.
Larry Lage, AP. Jim, can you just talk about the timeline about identifying players? You talked to 80. Like, what are the next steps? When does that start to pare down? When do they get together?
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of players. I think with the Olympics, it's a little bit different. You register your players with the Olympic Committee. So there is a September date where players need to be registered and on the quote-unquote long list, and players also need to be in the doping program. And so I've been in constant communication with both those organizations on the timing of it, and you literally just get the players submitted that way. We've obviously the announcement today, things will get a lot more formalized. I've talked to Tony a little bit, but as far as going over our player pool, a lot of that's been compiled by myself and Ben. Reaching out, number one, finding out where guys are at and what's going on contract-wise with them, and we'll move forward from here to start to formulate plans. From a hockey side of it, we're going to play November 10, 11, and 12 in the Deutschland Cup tournament in Augsburg, Germany. It's an event that we've been in since 2003, and over the last several years, we've alternated with Canada for that event. So we will play in that tournament with primarily European-based players. We'll probably bring upwards of 27 to 30 players to that tournament because we'll play the 3 games. And that will provide us, number one, an avenue for the coaches to be around the players in the Europe pool, evaluate guys that are there, many of them that have played for us at a wide variety of levels before. And we'll use that as kind of the basis to start to build out where we think we're headed roster-wise. And then from that, start to plug in, I'm going to say holes, but start to plug in spots, so to speak, of where guys are going to be utilized. And then we start to factor in the NCAA players available to us and the American Hockey League players available to us. So I think from the emphasis and focus right now is to just make sure I get guys eligible and in the pool. And then we start to have meetings with Tony and the coaches to come up with a working depth chart, if you will, of where we start to see plugging guys in. And off the event in November, I think especially from that time forward, then we'll start to say, this is what we think we got, and here's where we start to plug in some of the other players available to us.
Tony was talking about development too. Our top junior league in the U.S. is the USHL, of course, here. Bob Fallon, the commissioner, is here. Bob, nice to see you. Thanks for being here. Further questions? Craig?
For Jim Johansson.
Can you identify yourself?
Sorry, Craig Custance with The Athletic for Jim Johansson. Based on the player pool that you're looking at, I know we're early on in the process, but have you kind of been able to identify an identity of what the team will look like in terms of style of play?
Well, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. I think we're going to be a very skilled team. I think there's a lot of skilled, good players available to us. No matter what, the game's about skating today, so we're going to get up and down the ice. But I also think there's the uniqueness of it. I think you're going to see a blend of older, experienced players that quote unquote know how to play the game, that know the big ice, and also know how to keep your team in games. And the dynamic part of the offense, I think, is going to come from the overall depth of forward and depth of player that we have available to us. I think the injection of really 3 different entities of the guys playing in Europe at various stages in their careers, the NCAA guys, and then the American Hockey League players. I think there's a unique blend there that they're going to feed off each other, and you'll see obviously an up-tempo team. You're going to see a lot of puck control, especially on the big ice over there. But I think you're also going to see guys that just know how to play the game, and obviously then Tony and the coaches will get much more involved in how that's going to take formation.
Yeah, and of course the potential Chris Chelios, as we heard. How's the audio, guys, back there? Okay with it? You hear it? Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, Emily.
Hey, I'm Emily with ESPN, and this is for Coach Granato. Just can you explain to me a little bit about your absence from Wisconsin, how that will work, and additionally, with just such a big college presence on your staff, does that mean you're expecting for more college players to be a part of the team?
Sure. As far as how it's going to play out, it'll play out the same way for me as it does for the players that we select. We're going to be able to stay with our organization, with our teams, with our programs, be able to work with them all year. We'll take our break for our 1 week break for our Deutschland Cup there, and then the 2 weeks in the Olympics. I'll have plenty of time on the side to be working on our U.S. thing on my free time, but I'll be coaching the University of Wisconsin. I'll miss 4 games is the way it looks on the schedule right now. And I think that's a great thing. I think it's great for our players to be able to stay with the programs and with their organizations that they've made commitments to. We'll be able to watch them closely with Ben Smith out there, with Jimmy, with Ronnie Ralston, being able to have access to being able to get film on a lot of these players. And as the year goes on, we'll just continue to work together to be ready to go when we do get to South Korea. So I think it's a great schedule for all of us. I think having our international players still be able to play overseas and get their experience over there to get ready for the Olympics will be a positive thing. And like Jimmy said, the insertion of having some collegiate players possibly join our roster and some American League players, I think we're going to have a really nice team. As far as the approval from Coach Alvarez, that was pretty easy. He smiled and laughed. He actually thought I was leaving the day I left into his office and wasn't going to return until the end of February. So when I told him I was going to still be able to coach this year, he was really excited about me being able to continue.
World Junior Summer Showcase, by the way, continues here at USA Hockey Arena. NHL Network has that today, 1 o'clock Canada, Sweden, and then at 4 o'clock US and Finland. And further questions, Jonathan? We need the mic here, please, guys. Thank you.
Jonathan Knight, Hockey TV. Jim, is it possible that we'll see any NHL players at all? I know they're contracted to it, but is the pool any of those at all, or no?
No, we're obviously going to honor our NHL partnership, and it's very straightforward. Players on the NHL registry, meaning an NHL registered contract, are not going to be eligible for this, and we don't anticipate any changes in that, and obviously going to honor our agreement.
And one other thing, this big historic moment, it's been 20 years since we've seen any college athletes actually really truly play in this Olympics. I mean, Coach, for you also, how exciting is this to go back and actually take a college team in a sense, or a minor league team to the Olympics? You were 88, you were in college, Wisconsin, you were a college player. Talk to me about that.
Correct. I think it's an outstanding opportunity for a lot of our American players that will be, like Jimmy alluded to earlier, we got a ton of skill, a ton of depth. It's a great opportunity for us to show off that depth. There'll be a lot of players there that you will enjoy watching, that will play a fast, fun game, that will represent our country in the right way. So I think it's a great opportunity. Obviously, Jimmy's got a ton of phone calls from. I'm sure I'm going to start getting a ton of calls from a lot of players that are going to, try and put themselves in the player pool, and I'm looking forward to watching them. I know, like you said, I had the opportunity to do it. There's no bigger stage. There's no greater experience as an athlete, as a coach, as a fan than to be part of an Olympics, and we're going to give that opportunity to 25 guys, and like I said, I think we got a really great opportunity to compete for a medal. Our depth which continues to grow and grow, and with the help of what USA Hockey's done, we're going to have a fun team to coach.
Anything to add on that, Jim? Is there anything to add on that, or?
Well, no, I think Tony hit it off a lot. I mean, I think from the excitement of talking to these players about the potential opportunity for that it's the fun part of the job. I mean, it's just great talking to them. For me, it's catching up with some of these guys too that I've had at this tournament and other events. So, it's going to be an exciting team to watch. I think it's going to be a good tournament. I think the tournament's going to be a good tournament. I think it's when at USA Hockey meetings this past June, Jim Smith and Pat Keller talked about, they used the words challenges and opportunities with an emphasis on opportunities. And I think this is going to be an unbelievable opportunity for everybody involved in it. And I think we want to take number one, take as much enjoyment as we can in that. I always tell our players that things, don't forget to enjoy it. It's supposed to be fun. And I think certainly the same thing for all of the staff involved and all the players involved. It's a great opportunity, enjoy it, but now let's go out there. And the great part is our players are going to be there with a mindset that they know they're going to compete for a medal.
Adam Kimmelman from NHL.com. For Tony, I know it's early in the process, but have you determined what areas your assistants are going to specialize in?
We've discussed it with them. I've had lots of conversations with all the assistants. There's some obvious ones that with Chris being an elite NHL defenseman for so many years and having so much international experience at the back end, he'll probably run the D. Scotty Young's had a lot of experience with the forwards and working power play, so we've discussed that. We'll continue to, I guess, as we watch film and continue our communications, and we get closer to the Deutschland Cup, we'll be able to start to implement that. But yeah, there's some natural fits. Scotty Young, like I said, power play, which probably will leave Chris on the penalty killing side of things. And then you got Ronnie Ralston will do a great job breaking down video, and I think with the experience that Keith has on breaking down and studying our opponents and giving us pre-scouts, he'll have a lot of impact on that. And all the guys will obviously, when we're picking this team and putting it together, they're going to have big input on what's important that we add to our team.
Okay. Ryan?
Ryan Kennedy from the Hockey News. A question for Tony. Given that you're bringing players from these sort of disparate leagues and that Russia is going to have the full sort of KHL cohort there, is there any Miracle on Ice kind of vibe to this? Are you going to play down that aspect? Does it factor in at all?
I think that's a great question. I think respecting your opponents and knowing that certain countries are doing things a little bit differently than we are. Like I said earlier, I really like our approach on what we're doing to pick our team, to get our team ready. The Russians obviously are an elite powerhouse in international competitions at every level, but if you look and watch what we've done internationally at all levels too, we've competed for medals. And when we enter a tournament, whether it be World Juniors, whether it be any national tournament, when Team USA and the U.S. program enters a tournament, we expect to compete for a medal. And this will be no different. Obviously, we haven't had amateurs, or we haven't played without the NHL now for quite some time. So it's a new opportunity for a different pool of players. But like we keep referring to, I think these players will be extremely talented and give ourselves an opportunity to compete with the Russian team that will be playing together in KHL this year.
Speaking of gold medals, we got our gold medal World Junior coaching staff here. Bob Motzko and crew, great to have you guys here, and we'll be looking forward to Buffalo. Best of luck, guys. Julie.
Julie Robenheimer, New York Times. Jim, can you tell me, in terms of the player pool that you have here, what's going to be the most difficult position for you to fill?
To be honest, I think we're comfortable in all the depth we have in all the areas. Obviously, the short tournaments and everything like that, goaltending gets a huge focus. And we're still early a little bit in the process on the goaltending side, but we have a couple guys with real good experience, both internationally and with USA Hockey, that are confirmed and playing in Europe. We'll obviously look a little bit at the NCAA ranks and some of the players that are in there. And in the American League right now, that process is literally going on right now from at all positions, obviously. But goaltending is always a key. Anytime you go in a short tournament, you need great goaltending. I think we're comfortable with where we're at right now, but it's also an evolving player pool, and that's the same for all the positions. And so, again, just initially going over a sheet of paper with Tony, with a lot of names on it, even his eyes opened a little bit. Wow, wow, there's a lot of good players, and I think our depth is as strong and as better as it's ever been, especially in Europe for this upcoming year. And there's still players making decision on that. So, again, from a position standpoint, goaltending always gets a spotlight. But I think we're comfortable with where the entire pool is right now.
And for Tony, just out of curiosity, in terms of your coaching game plan, do you have an outline of the kinds of players that you want to have? Or are you going to allow the player pool to dictate the kind of game plan you have?
A little bit of both. I think that's some discussions that we'll have as coaches and as a staff moving forward. We're going to get together real soon and have these discussions on our player personnel, on what's available, what type of team we want to play with, what our system will be. I have my ideas. Keith has his ideas. Jimmy, Ronnie, and Scotty all have their ideas as well. We'll put together something that is easy for our players to understand. We'll work on making sure we communicate with them as the year moves forward. I think that's going to be a real big piece to this, is getting to know our players really well and them getting to know us really well. So we'll set up ways of communicating with them. So when we do get to the tournaments, they'll know they'll know a lot about us, and we'll know a lot about them. So I think that's one of the things that we really look forward to as a staff, is get to know our guys a lot better. So when we do get there, we're comfortable.
I got this question here that I'm going to just take from Twitter here before I get back in the room here, from Alex Pruitt from SI to Jim, and the question around recently retired NHL players and their place in your mind in terms of the selection process.
Yeah, I think they're all it's unique situations with all of them, and we will obviously, as those players either publicly or decisions get made, for me it's all about getting them in the pool first. So yes, we will put players in the pool that we think might have a potential to make this team. I think there are a few NHL players that we're waiting to see what they're going to do, and again, it's guys when not without naming names, but I mean there's some guys that have a rich history both in the NHL and with USA Hockey that we think could potentially really help this roster. And again, for what I do, I always try to get as much quote-unquote weaponry to the coaches. And so, trust me, we're going to dig over every stone to see what the options are and where the fit is. And a lot of that will come from the discussions that'll be, ongoing, certainly from this day forward with Tony and the staff and with Ben and myself.
Jonathan, I should, right here, Jonathan, I just want to mention too, before I forget, for the fans watching on the live stream and those of you here in the audience, Coach Granato will be doing a Facebook Live on USA Hockey's Facebook page tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern, so you have a chance to talk to him, fans out there that would like to, and Jonathan, over to you. Could you introduce yourself again, please? Can we use the other mic here, right here, please, just to make sure we get it on the live stream? Thank you, guys.
Jim or Tony, question for you. Going forward, no NHL players in this. How do you get fans excited? Or anybody can answer this. How do you get fans excited for this? Going forward, and after you announce the roster, usually it's NHL guys in this, big names. People are excited. So what do we do to get people excited this year?
Turn the TV on. It's the Olympics. I mean, I think it's the Olympics, and it's funny because when I was talking to Tony a little bit yesterday, the Olympics it's really the joy of the Olympics is being in the village and seeing all the other sports and seeing all the other athletes from all the countries and I mean even regardless if it was NHL players or not NHL players, that's the neat part of the Olympics. And I think the other thing from the viewership and the fans, the Olympics are special, and I think. There's still a big body of the world that looks at the Olympics and think, oh, those young American guys, and whether we had our NHL guys on there or not, it was USA Hockey in the Olympics, and everyone obviously equated still to this day to the Miracle on Ice and our young boys against the world. So I think there's always been a fresh and a raw and a unique feel to the Olympic Games, and this is going to be great hockey. There's going to be 25 great stories of American guys that came up in wonderful grassroots systems that got help from volunteer coaches along the way that went to, whether it was NCAA programs and all that got great development. And these are going to be guys that someday are going to give back to our game as well. So I'm excited about the group that's going to be there. I think hockey fans always enjoy international competition, and there's going to be another great international competition.
Turn on the TV, like it, huh? NBC, by the way, if you're not aware. Craig? Yes, please.
Craig Custance with The Athletic still. Another one for Jim Johansson. To follow up on Alex's question from Twitter, for players that maybe don't have a contract or weighing that, and along with maybe college players that were weighing an entry-level deal with their teams, do you talk to those guys and say, look, there's probably a really good chance you'll be a part of this? Do you use the Olympics as a lure in those decisions?
No, I use it as a fact-based, like, here's what the rules are going to be. Like I've basically informed, especially the NCAA guys. I mean, I just informed them where I thought things were going and kept them up to date throughout the course of the summer, and said, hey, if you're around, we certainly want to get you in the pool and eligible. From the NHL side of it, I've talked to one NHL guy that might retire. Other than that, I'm giving them their time and letting them decide what's right for them, their family, and their career. And some of that they control, some of it they don't control. But as we get more into August here, and we start to know a little bit more what they're doing, I thought it was important that they had the time to decide that first and foremost. And secondly, I'm going to come in with the informative part of it, like here's literally what has to happen if you do want to be eligible for this. And so, again, would we reach out to them? Absolutely. And they'll be a part of our player pool, and they'll be part of our discussions. But until all of that is known, my job is really to make sure they know what the quote-unquote rules are, if you will, in being eligible to play for us.
Again, Tony had mentioned development, and obviously the National Team Development Program headquartered right here in Plymouth. And as part of this weekend, this press conference, the World Junior Summer Showcase, and we're also celebrating the 20th anniversary of the NTDP here tonight and tomorrow. Alumni, both in the player and coaching and staff and billets all will be gathering here for a grand celebration. So kind of fun that this all plays together. Just wanted to let you know that. Another question right here in front. Where do we have the mics at, guys?
Amy Johnson with Rocket Sports Media. This is for Jim and Tony. You talk about the opportunities, new opportunities with your talent pool now. Between college players, the American League, and your European leagues, do you feel that any of those leagues have better, perhaps, prepared players for international play on a global stage like this, or do you feel that the talent is pretty balanced throughout those leagues?
Yeah, I think the talent's balanced because I think no matter where you're playing, if you're an elite player, we're going to be looking at you and not so much where have you played and what league are you in. It's can you help our team. So all of them have different advantages. I think the good thing for us is most of our players have played in some sort of international tournament, whether it be World Championships, whether it be World Junior Championships, whether it be different international tournaments. Probably most of our team will have competed internationally wearing a U.S. sweater. So I think we'll pick from all of those leagues, and we'll be able, Coach Smith will be busy evaluating all our players as we move forward, but looking forward again to seeing how the roster is going to play out. But I would assume we'll have some from all of those places.
And I'd echo that, but I'd also say the core and base of the strength of this is college hockey, without a doubt. NCAA college hockey has done so much for the development of players, and it's just the bottom line is there's more numbers for us that come from those programs than any place else. And the amount of resources that go into it, but now the level of professionalism that is there, and the growth and development of the players both on the ice and off the ice from college hockey it's created the depth of USA hockey. And again, they get handed off as well. So I know there's an unreal appreciation both ways from how they get fed into those programs, but what comes out of those programs. And like I can look down this list of Europe, and it's a who's who of guys that played college hockey. And again, I think that's the exciting part, because there is a connection, there is a bond with those guys that when we get this pool of players together, there's going to be guys that both played together before, but there's going to guys that rivalries from their college days. And I think that's healthy, that's great, and again, that's created so much depth for us, and it's a key part of this. It will be a key part of why this team will be successful.
Jim had mentioned the Deutschland Cup, and we're working with Coach Granato on that pronunciation still.
I'm having trouble with that one.
Deutschland Cup, and that our Olympic coaching staff will be coaching that tournament and be part of the player evaluation process. And earlier today, Jim, you're sharing just kind of a story on the evolution. I thought it might be interesting just to touch on that.
Yeah, I think it was years ago, Art Berglund, and I think it was twofold. He said, we have to continue to raise USA Hockey's identity internationally and with our partner federations. But secondly, I think it's important to start to get around our player pool. And some of these guys, they play World Juniors or they get in the NHL an occasional World Championship, and then all of a sudden they're still really good hockey players, and they're playing in Europe, and there wasn't really an opportunity, if you will, for them to play for USA Hockey. So I think it was 2003, our first year. I'm trying to remember exactly, but so in 2003 we started doing it, and it's been one of the most enjoyable hockey experiences I've had every year. Now we're every other year, but being around those players. And I think I give credit to Art Berglund that he said, someday we might need those guys, and let's see them. And we've had plenty of players play in the World Championships that have played in the Deutschland Cup and have been, Andy Roach scored one of the great goals in USA Hockey at the 2004 World Championships, and he was playing over in Germany at the time. So I think that program has really helped raise our identity, number one, internationally, and secondly, it comes full circle right now in this year of that. Number one, we're experienced at the tournament, and we know what it is, and also our players look forward and expect to play in tournaments like that. So I think it's just another evolution of growth of USA Hockey. And in Europe, there's such pride in playing for quote-unquote the senior team. Like when a German or a Swiss guy says, I played on the national team and the senior team, that's a marker, that's a measure for that kid in his country. And I think some of our players start to feel that when we play events like the Deutschland Cup.
Okay, anything further? I will say that we need some one-offs here. Let me know, and we'll take care of that here in the room from the assembled media. Tony Granato, the 19th person only to ever be the head coach of a U.S. Olympic men's ice hockey team, and we look forward to the journey. Thank you all for being here today. Thanks to those of you watching live on the web stream, and have a great day, everybody.